Hi friends, I have been facing a pesky issue for a long time. To get rid of it, I decided to finally automate it and get rid of it. I hope this video will be useful to you too. Let's say I have resources on AWS and I want to protect it by AWS security groups. As a good practice, I restrict SSH access into my EC2 instance to clients coming from my home network. The problem is that whenever I unplug my router or router, my internet service provider issues me a new IP address. Next time I try to SSH in, the login will fail. Going to the browser every time to my AWS account and updating the security group is cumbersome. That's why I decided to automate it using a script. Now let's dive into the script source code. So I am in the AWS console, and for the setup I have couple of security groups here. One which allows SSH to developers and the other, let's say, for web server security group. So if I click on this security group and scroll down to the inbound rules, you see there are multiple developers IP address set up here to allow access for SSH. And this last one is my IP address, which I'm interested in, right? So this IP, let's say few days ago, it was this IP and now this IP has changed. So that's what the goal is, to automate using a script to update this IP. Going back, we have another security group. So there are two security groups where this IP was listed. When we run that script, we'll see that both the security group has been updated with the latest IP. Now, one thing is, with the AWS CLI, there's no provision to update a security group rule. So what you can do is revoke or delete the security group rule first, and then add another security group with the updated IP. So let's take a look. So I am at my Linux terminal and you see a couple of panes here. So the top pane is where the source code will be displayed, and the bottom is where I'll execute some commands to explain what the source code is doing, right? So if you see the start of the source code, it enters a prompt to the user to enter the name as it appears in the security group rule description. So there is nothing but the description for the entry where you are trying to update the IP address. So in this example, I'll enter visa to learn laptop, right? So that's what my security rule group was. Next is, what's my latest IP address which I want to update, right? So there's a nice utility called checkip.amazonaws.com. If you curl that, it will give you your public IP address. Next, we have a complex command here. So let's explain one by one. So what it does is, first it does AWS EC2 describe security groups. What this does is it will give you an output in a JSON format, details of all the security groups in your account. So let's try running this so that it will be clear what the output is, right? So in the bottom pane, I'll try to execute this. So it's a big output, but what we see on the screen is relevant and enough for us to understand, right? So now, once we execute this, what we pass on this output to a utility called JQ. So JQ is a lightweight JSON processor. It is like SED SED for JSON data. You can use it to slice, filter, map, and transform structured data with the same ease that SED, awk, grep let you play with, right? So I've included in the description how to install JQ and even how to install AWS CLI, right? So that should help you get started with it. So the output of AWS EC2 describe security groups is piped to JQ, where we also pass an argument, whatever we had entered in the previous prompt, right? And then as we see, it picks up the first field security groups and assign to a variable called SG. Then it picks the IP permissions field because that's what we are interested in, and it assigns to a variable called IP perm. Then we are interested in the IP ranges field where it assigns it to another variable. Now, as you see here, it's a complex hierarchy structure, the JSON structure. What we are interested in having a flat structure with the fields of interest. So that's what the next step is. We pipe this entire output and create a flat JSON structure with the fields that we require. So the fields are security group ID, and we pick it from the SG variable which we defined earlier. Then it's the from port, similarly IP protocol, and the CIDR IP, and the description, of course. Now with all these JSONs, what we want to do is we just want to pick the one where the description contains whatever input that the user had provided, right? In our case, it's visa to learn laptop. Now, once we have the security group rules only for the description that we provided, what it does is it will do a for loop and iterate through each of the security groups, then extract out details from it like the from port, IP protocol, CIDR IP, etc. Now, it might happen that for a particular description, there are multiple IP addresses specified. Let's say instead of deleting the old IP address manually, you just kept on adding new IP address. So there'll be multiple security group rules for the same description. Now to handle that scenario, there's a for loop for each of the IP address, and what it will do is it will extract the protocol, port, and CIDR, and then as a first step, it will revoke the inbound rule for the security group. So as I mentioned earlier, right, there's no provision to edit or update the security rule group. You'll have to delete it first and then add it back. So AWS EC2 revoke security group ingress, what this will do is basically revoke or delete that particular rule. And in the next step, we add it back. So AWS EC2 authorize security group ingress. This is the command which adds it back. And in this case, we use the variable my IP, which at the top we saw, right? It's your current IP address that is given by this service called check IP Amazon AWS.com. So that's about the script. So let's try executing it and see the output, right? Let me clear the screen first. Now if I run this command, as we saw in the source code, it will prompt you to enter the description, right? So I'll enter visa to learn laptop and I'll press enter. Now it will revoke the security group first and then add it back. So as we saw the setup, there were two security groups which had our IP address. So it should have done this for two of them. Let's see. So first it has done for the security group ending with 4E95. So it revoked it first and the return output was true. And then while adding back, it added it with the new IP address. And this is the output where the return statement is true. Now it did it for another security group ending with CC98. Again, it revoked it first and then added it back. And again, the return output is true, which indicates it was a success. Now we can go back to the AWS console and check each security group to ensure that it's updated. So if we scroll to the right, you see the IP address has changed to whatever the latest IP address is. And there's only one entry in the security group, which means the old one was deleted and a new one was added. Again, if we go to the SSH security group here also, if we scroll down and check, so our IP address is updated and the rest of the developers IP is untouched. So only the IP address where the description matches what the user has provided, that was updated. So that's all I had to share in this video. Hope this was useful to you. Thank you.